All right, before we start going to our second session of visitor statements, I'd like to, was brought up as items for discussion at the board meeting, was an update on the pool repairs. So Kevin, I'm going to turn that to you.
So we had a second test and balance. The original agreement called for some additional ductwork and work to be done to the pool so that we can improve the airflow in the pool, as well as eliminate or exhaust the chloramines in the pool deck for the swimmers. All those repairs were completed, and one of the final steps in that process is for the installers to conduct a test and balance. What a test and balance does, it goes to various points throughout the airflow system and return system and fresh outside air system, and it takes measurements to make sure that the proper amount of air supply is being provided as specified in the design. When they finished the original repairs, there was a test and balance conducted by the vendor who did the sheet metal work, the duct work, and White's engineer as well as Joel thought that maybe there wasn't enough guidance to that because he wasn't sure exactly what levels he was supposed to be getting, and there were some things that were very unclear. So White, after getting that initial report, almost immediately said, we'd like to bring in another test and balance company of our own to do a test and balance. We said that's not a problem, and we also suggested they consider using the test and balance company we used to originally identify our concern last spring. And they ended up agreeing to using our test and balance company, or the test and balance company, our new architect, and the engineer that's working for Environ suggested. In about an hour, well, there's two issues. Issue number one was we had to shut down the machine so that they could set up their equipment, and in the process of restarting the machine, the HVAC machine, they blew some wires to the actual machine, so the machine was down for a few hours. They luckily had the service contractor on hand in case something happened, so then he was able to rewire some things and get that unit to restart. About halfway through the initial test and balance, they identified that the supply air that the unit is supposed to be producing, there was a significant drop in pressure. And this is something new because all of our work and and the design to address our concerns was focused on the return side. You know, sucking the water across the pool, blowing the chloramines across the pool water, and having those new return vents suck the chloramines off the pool deck and exhaust them. And also making sure there's enough outside air being provided. It was identified, their engineer was on hand for the whole test of balance, and as soon as they got that reading of the significant drop in pressure, they began to inspect that. And basically, what they've identified is that from the original construction, there was an installment problem that was not as specified. And so, to be very general, I'll use a general example. If the rooftop unit is supposed to apply 10 pounds of air pressure per minute, by the time it gets through its first turn, it's already cut by like 50%, because not enough air, the way the ductwork was installed, it's misaligned, so only about half of the opening is available for the air to flow down through the ductwork and provide the system with the airflow. So a majority of that air is just circulating around inside the chamber of the unit. So there's two ways. So their engineer identified this about 1 or 2 o'clock on Friday. We met with Joel. I asked Joel to give me an email summary, which I had, and I'm updating the board today. Their engineer came out right away yesterday. Asked to come out yesterday. Was here yesterday morning, or so that happened on Friday afternoon. He was here Monday morning to begin identifying the issues. One of the problems is the first original way that you would try to address this is you would just simply go up in the ceiling where the duct starts to come down from the rooftop unit and detach the duct, move it. If you have to recut the hole so that the opening is to the size as designed and so the air can flow. The problem with that is that hangs directly over our pool. The lift that we would need to bring in and cannot fit through nor turn on our pool deck to provide access to the ductwork. So the only other option would be to either scaffold completely over the pool so that they can get to the ductwork, or drain the pool and scaffold from the pool floor up, which I told them was not an option for us unless they were going to pay to fill our pool, which they agreed. They said if they eventually had to do that, they would scaffold over the pool. Brad Paulson confirmed that. But so what their engineer is suggesting is that they come from the top down, go into the unit, put in some airflow deflectors so that the air is specifically directed through the current hole, and try to do some modifications to the inside of the chamber so that it's closer to specifications and more air can get through and supply the whole system as required. We talked today. I made it very clear that once they think they have how they want to do this, that we want to provide a copy of their solution to the third-party engineer that was working with Environ that signed off on the return duct work, to make sure that he's comfortable with it, as well as we'll probably have our new architect look at it as well. I did ask the question, and they were unable to respond to me today. They were going to check with their in-house engineer. The question I asked was, with this installation being incorrect from original construction, is that what caused all these issues we've been having with the Ceresco unit that we've had? You know, the motor's blown out. We've had to, rechange the pulleys and shrink the pulleys. Now we had to pay for some new work to be done to the Ceresco unit just with this last repair. They couldn't answer that question at this time. They were going to get back to me on that. So I did talk with our legal counsel. He feels that at this time they're still working with us, which I feel they are too. I had a conference call with Brad Paulson from White, as well as Terry Moeller, their lead architect, today. They were, identified that there's definitely a problem from the original construction, and that they're going to address it, and they're going to take a responsibility to address it. So I do feel comfortable with that. Our attorney did suggest that we send a letter and to amend our current agreement, because our current agreement was all focused basically on the return side, and now this is kind of a different scope of work. So I'm working with the attorney so that I can draft a letter to send to White to just acknowledge that there's been modifications to the project, and we should modify the agreement to match the modifications in the project. So Operation Pool is still ongoing.
And there's no warranty.
Unbelievable.
Warranty is not started yet, I think.
We had a 9-month review period that was supposed to start once the test and balance came in and we felt everything was running to specifications. Since that did not occur, our review period has not started. The only concern that could arise is we wanted to we bargained with them to do a 9-month review period so that we would catch a hot the hot summer months and some cold winter months. And now that this might not be completed till sometime in March, we may need to extend that agreement or modify that review period so that we can still catch next winter as well as this summer, to make sure the unit is fully functional both in extreme conditions. Hot and cold.
Although you say that it's under the new scope of outgoing air versus incoming air, there was a problem, an unidentified problem.
Correct.
So it always was a problem. It's not a new problem, it's just something that's been newly identified.
I think you meant the agreement only addresses
Yeah,
exhaust. It doesn't address input exhaust. It only addressed exhaust. Because they told
The
us
scope of work strictly
that was what
focuses
the
on.
problem was.
Yeah.
Yeah, based on.
None of this work is mentioned in the agreement, so we need to get it in the agreement.
And then second, maybe not tonight, but on a different night, maybe when we end at a reasonable hour, we could head that way before going to closed session, and you could just point out for the board members what's
Sure.
been done.
We can do that tonight.
And there was, I was told this was definitely not, it was related to them working in the pool, but not related to so when the unit was down for an hour or two, obviously there's some condensation built up and some heat built up, so then as soon as we did get everything operating and everything was blowing through the air ducts, it did trip a fire alarm. So we did have to evacuate the school on Friday, because that's our protocol when that goes off, until the fire department comes and tells us it's okay. And then it happened again, the same fire alarm did get tripped again later that evening, so we did have to clear out the gymnasiums during the basketball drill. So the last two basketball games I came to with my and the conference swim party, and I think there might even have been something else going on. So
Always something going on.
All right, any questions
Yeah.
for Kevin on this?
Just two things, Kevin. You said, the engineers are checking to see whether this could have affected negatively the Ceresco unit operation, but in your bag of tricks or your list of things, are you asking Ceresco that? Because that would be a better
they're going to
person
go to Ceresco, and we're going to get an opinion from our engineer
Okay.
that's working with us of what he thinks.
And the second thing is, we did talk about this a little, but your intent is to say, it's got to work the way it was designed. Because if the, air ducts, if you block them, they restrict flow. So, maybe there's a way to do that the way they said, but at the end of the day, we expect it to operate the way it was designed, right?
Correct.
If they can do that, you're going to be happy then, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And the only way we'll really be able to do that is that we'll have to do another test and balance test. Again, once they do all these repairs and see what the pressure's at and what the airflow's at.
Okay.
Again, so
Do you have any idea how many trained people looked at this thing and didn't see that? I mean, I'm
Since the
flabbergasted.
beginning.
Yeah.
well, I think
It's
the
incredible.
bigger question is how this was missed in the beginning
Right.
of the project. And we identified for them in the original, when we started to bring up these concerns, is that when we go back to historically on our original report, or our concern with them was the test and balance that was done initially when the construction project was completed was very close, give or take, as we talked about again today, of being where it needed to be. So it was just meeting the mark or just slightly below the mark back in 2009.
Yeah.
So we probably knew there was an issue back then, or we should have identified, or McHugh or whoever should have identified, like, hey, as a brand new unit, this should be pumping well over enough airflow, not exactly what we need. But I wasn't here at that
Right,
time,
no,
so.
I'm not casting blame, I'm just
Okay.
flabbergasted.
All right, keep us updated what's going on, and we'll go from there. All right, we're gonna go into closed session, but before we do that, there's another way for the visitors in the audience to make any statements. At this time, anybody on this side? Anybody on that side? Seeing none, we're gonna go into closed session, go and talk about personnel issues, sale or lease of land, litigation, superintendent evaluation. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Resolved that the Board of Education, Township High School, District 208, Cook County, Illinois, enters closed session for the purpose of considering appointment, employment, or dismissal of employee, sale or lease of land, superintendent evaluation, and litigation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mike Welch. Mary Ann?
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jepson?
Yes.
Dr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Gritchen?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
Yes, all right. We are all done. We are going to, can we go to the swimming pool right now?
We can go to a closed session. Well, we're dismissing, so.
So we're dismissing, we're gonna go to everybody keep the cameras on. We're gonna go to swimming pool to look at the work that's been done so far, and then we're gonna go back to our conference room for a closed session. All right, thank you, and your watches are right, it is 7:37, so. Not in the morning, but in the afternoon, so, I mean at night.
So